We've all been there, right? A huge project full of promise starts to go sideways. Deadlines slip, budgets start to explode, and that feeling of success, it starts to feel pretty far away. But what if you could build a plan that was actually ready for the real world? Today, we're going to look at how to forge a plan that's not just a document, but a real foundation for success. It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Why do so many massive, important projects seem to just fall apart? Is it just bad luck? Some random event you couldn't see coming? Poor execution? Well, yeah, those things can play a part, but more often than not, the real problem is hiding in plain sight, right at the very beginning. That's it, the foundation. A weak, unrealistic, or poorly thought-out schedule is kind of like trying to build a skyscraper on sand. You know it's not a matter of if it's going to fail, but when. The absolute key to a successful project is a bulletproof baseline plan. So, here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to break down what makes a plan truly solid. We'll introduce a super useful framework, the 4 C's. We'll walk through building and defending your plan. Then we'll see it in action with an incredible historical example. And finally, we'll wrap it all up by talking about your project's foundation. Okay, the secret to a schedule you can actually rely on can be boiled down to 4 key characteristics. Now, these aren't just buzzwords, you know? They are the 4 pillars that are going to hold up your entire project. Getting these right is the difference between a project that flies and one that just crumbles. Let's see what they are. And here they are. Your plan has to be comprehensive, which means it captures all the work. It needs to be well-constructed with a logical flow that actually makes sense. It's got to be credible, defensible, realistic, and ready for risks. And finally, it has to be controlled, so you can actually track your progress and make smart moves. Let's start with those first 2 C's, which are all about the architecture of your schedule. Think of this as the blueprinting phase. You're making sure every single piece is accounted for and every connection is solid before anyone even picks up a tool. To make a plan comprehensive, you have to start right here with something called the Work Breakdown Structure, or WBS. Now, this isn't just a to-do list. It's a deep, methodical process of breaking down the entire project scope. It's the step that forces you to answer that critical question. Have we literally thought of everything? It ensures nothing gets forgotten. And you can see here just how powerful the WBS is. It is the central hub. It's the single source of truth that everything else flows from. The project scope feeds the WBS, and the WBS then defines the schedule, the budget, the whole baseline. There's a really simple rule here. If it's not in the WBS, it's not in the project. Period. All right, next up is making sure that plan is well constructed. It's not enough to just know what you have to do. You have to map out how all the pieces fit together. Good practices mean creating a dynamic, logic-driven schedule where one task naturally leads to the next. Bad practices, on the other hand, create a fragile plan that's just waiting to break. Things like missing links between tasks or using hard constraints, which is basically nailing a task to a specific date on the calendar no matter what. Those things hide the real problems until it's way too late.
Okay, so you've built a plan that's comprehensive and well-constructed. Awesome. Now comes the hard part. You have to make it defensible. The next 2 C's, credible and controlled, are all about turning your schedule from a piece of paper into a dynamic, reality-based tool for actually managing the project.
A credible plan is an honest plan. It accepts that, stuff happens. You have to account for risk. And risk really comes in 2 main flavors. You've got your reducible risks. These are specific events you can kind of see coming, like a supplier delay, and you can actively plan for them. Then you have irreducible risks. That's just the natural, random variation in how long things take. A truly credible schedule has a plan for both. So how in the world do you plan for that irreducible, natural chaos? Well, this is where it gets really smart. You can use statistical methods like a Monte Carlo simulation. What you're basically doing is running your project plan on a computer thousands of times, and each time the computer slightly varies the task durations. This gives you a probability curve for your finish date. From that, you can calculate how much of a time buffer, a schedule margin, you need to add to be, say, 80% confident you'll hit your deadline. It's not guesswork, it's a data-driven safety net that makes your plan genuinely credible.
And finally, we get to the 4th C, controlled. A plan, no matter how brilliant, is totally useless if you just make it and then stick it in a drawer. This C means you are constantly actively tracking your real progress against that baseline you worked so hard to build. A controlled schedule isn't just a map, it's a live GPS. It tells you exactly where you are, if you're drifting off course, and what you need to do to get back on track. I know this all might sound a little theoretical. So let's look at a really high-stakes, real-world example of these principles in action long before we had any fancy project management software.
So picture this. It's 1907. The U.S. Army wants to buy a heavier-than-air flying machine. The performance requirements were so demanding, so out there, that only one bidder was even considered viable: the Wright brothers. They had to deliver something that had literally never existed before, on time and on budget. Their entire success hinged on their plan. Their plan was comprehensive because they started with an unbelievably clear definition of done. I mean, just look at these requirements. These weren't vague goals. They were specific, measurable targets. They knew exactly what that final product had to do, and that formed the bedrock of their entire work plan. Now this is how their plan became both credible and controlled. This is a chart they used to track the aircraft's weight. The blue line was their plan, and the red line was the absolute maximum weight they could have. They knew that if the plane got too heavy, it would never meet the flight requirements. By tracking this technical data, they could measure their true progress. It was an early warning system that tied the physical reality of the build directly to their schedule's credibility. So, from the Wright brothers to today's most complicated programs, you see, the principles don't really change. The quality of your plan will always, always determine the quality of your execution. And that's the bottom line. A schedule is not just a document you check off a list. It's not a hoop to jump through. It's an active, indispensable tool for managing the work. It's your guide, it's your diagnostic tool, and it's your absolute best defense against the chaos of a real project. And that brings us right back to you. Before you kick off your next big thing, just take a second and think about those 4 C's. Is your plan comprehensive, well-constructed, credible, and controlled? Because the answer to those questions, well, that's very likely going to determine the fate of your project.